Hi, I'm Michael Hartman.
I'm Naomi Liu.
And I'm Mike Rizzo. And this is OpsCast,
a podcast for marketing ops pros
and RevOps pros.
Created by the Mo Pros, the #1 community for marketing operations professionals.
Tune in to each episode as we chat with real professionals to help elevate you in your marketing operations career.
Hello, I'm Courtney Makara, and this is the Society of Marketing Technology Consulting podcast. SMTC has joined forces with the marketingops.com community, but our mission is still the same: to educate and support anyone involved in the MarTech world as a consultant.
Hey, this is Mike from marketingops.com. If you're thinking about going into consulting or you're already a successful consultant, join us online by becoming a member. As a pro member, you can join the SMTC and other private networks at marketingops.com.
In this podcast series, Grant Gregorian and I interviewed guests on their journeys as consultants. We discussed all that it means to be a great MarTech consultant, from setting up their business or joining an agency, and how to find new clients and keep their existing clients happy. I hope you enjoy the interview. Our guest is Bryan D'Andrea, who is an independent consultant from San Diego, California. Bryan, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, Courtney. Hi, Grant. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so you are a new face for Grant and I. We have not met before, and I am so excited to get to know you and hear about your journey. Grant put a little call out on LinkedIn to look for people who had worked in agencies and been independent, and you responded to the call.
Yes, I did. It was really interesting to see a message like that. I had to jump all over it because, it's been a fun ride being an independent consultant, and as you said, somebody that's come from a background at an agency as well. And so excited to talk more about that today.
So Bryan, can you just, I want to know, what sort of consulting you do today? Just give us a little pitch, and then I want to know how you got there. Tell us your story.
Sure. Today, service-wise, I position myself as kind of a MarTech, marketing technology operations specialist. So I tend to work within platforms like Salesforce, Marketo, Pardot, HubSpot, those are the like, and work with a variety of companies to really help them optimize the usage of those platforms, as well as create better systems of alignment between marketing, sales, customer success teams, and making sure their data and lead flow is integrated properly, and just doing all the things that really help them focus on more of the business critical objectives when it comes to sales and marketing.
Are there like specific tools that you focus on that you like to work with, or?
Kind of like I mentioned. So Pardot, HubSpot, Salesforce are usually the ones that my clients will have. And a lot of times, Grant, I'll get engagements with an organization because they either adopted one of these systems and they realize they just don't have the in-house bandwidth or expertise to, give them the full attention that they need to make them run properly. Or you'll have clients that, maybe using one system and they need to migrate everything over to a new system. And then you have a lot of organizations that are constantly running campaigns and different sales and marketing efforts through them. And they really need a second set of eyes and a second set of hands that can be on top of the campaign and really take ownership of the management of it.
Right. And then how did you get started?
So I, like I said, been doing this now for going on 5 years. It's interesting as I reflect back upon it because I never really, thought I had a desire to be an independent consultant or anything like that. But I remember back to my days when I worked with a B2B marketing agency, and we utilized a handful of contractors and freelancers, and I kind of always just found it interesting. That people can make a living that way, right? And so just was more so curious about it in the beginning, like, oh, that's really fascinating and that's kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. I wonder what that entails. I wonder how those people got to that point and what that means. And so, had those thoughts, but kind of always put it in the back of my head, never really took it seriously in terms of a career path. And it wasn't until my wife and I relocated across the country. We moved from the Midwest out here to the West Coast, San Diego. And I got a full-time position with an organization pretty quickly. And, unfortunately or fortunately, how I look at it now, it just wasn't a great fit. And it was pretty apparent right away that it wasn't a great fit. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? When you spend a lot of time and effort and energy to seek out a position, and for whatever reason, it might fall short, whether it's just a misalignment between you and the organization or the type of work you were doing or anything like that. I'm sure there's a lot of folks that have been in that type of situation. And so that's where I was. And just the idea of having to restart that process, restart that search, and go through it again in a short period of time was really discouraging and really defeating at the time for me. And I kind of had this voice in the back of my head that said, what about this freelancing, this independent consultant contracting world? You had been thinking about it before. And this might give you the perfect opportunity to do it. So, long story short, I quit my job one day, and the next day I just went full throttle into contracting. And I know for a lot of people that may seem very overwhelming, and I know fellow freelancers and contractors that don't start out that way, right? They kind of get a side hustle going or do things part-time. And certainly there's a lot of folks that have been successful in that manner too. But for me, the circumstances really kind of mandated that I took a real giant leap of faith, and, I'm thankful that it's worked out.
That is an amazing leap of faith. And it sounds like it was a big decision made pretty quickly. I mean, did you go and get an LLC and get an accountant and all this stuff, or did you just start looking for clients and looking for work?
Yeah, I took the route of really just looking for clients and looking for work right away. As I mentioned, we had just gone through a big relocation across the country. So the idea of kind of spending more money as I wasn't bringing any in was not very appealing to me,
right.
not very appealing to my wife as well. So I really just took a very organic approach, and really a grinding type approach to get some of those initial projects. So spent a lot of time on LinkedIn and reached out to people I worked with and had conversations with in the past, even if those folks I hadn't necessarily had any meaningful relationship with. It was more like you gotta, there's no substitute for obviously the grind and the hard work. And so, I spent a lot of time reaching out to my network. And then the other thing I did was really explore some of the freelancing and independent contractor networks and platforms that are out there. So the Gurus, the Fivers, the Upworks of the world. And, it had some success there, some more than others, depending on the platform. And so early on, it was very much a combination of how can I leverage my existing relationships, and then also how can I, maybe branch out and start to build up sort of a portfolio of sorts with others that I may have not had a relationship with in the past.
Well, I commend you for the hustle. It's very impressive, and probably, like you said, a little nerve-wracking. When you are that new and getting started, how do you figure out the right rate to charge when you're like, I'll take anything, but at the same time, you don't want to sell yourself short, and you want to make sure that you're giving, value to the team, but also making an adequate amount to support yourself?
Yeah. I think it's a couple things. I mean, first of all, I had a little bit of a benefit in terms of, again, my agency experience, because we did utilize various contractors and freelancers. And I kind of had a little glimpse into, at least at a starting point, what they would charge. But I also spent a good amount of time on my own digging into, just searching and reading and listening and trying to figure out, okay, how do you even go about establishing what that price point is? And so I think it's very different depending on the type of work that you do. But I think at a starting point, you have to try to understand, okay, if this was a full-time role, right, what would that be in terms of an annual salary? And start to do the math and break it down and look at how can I, get my foot in the door and not have pricing be a sticking point, But at the same time, to your point, Courtney, of, not selling myself short and making sure I'm not undervaluing my services. So there's I don't think any magic, bullet or formula. It's, again, kind of digging into some of the resources that are out there and understanding where you could potentially start. And then for me, as I started to get work, it was, very much a fluid situation of raising that rate, but realizing maybe that was too high of a rate, lowering that rate back down, looking at, the types of projects and how I'm scoping those and how I'm pricing those out. So it's a continued learning experience. And even, again, I'm going on 5 years that it's still a learning experience, and it's still, tinkering around with how you do that and how you position yourselves. And, I think that's the other thing. It's not just the price, it's understanding how you can talk about your services, right? And how you can build value into the entire process. Again, I feel fortunate that I came from an agency background, because that was very much a lot of what we did for ourselves and a lot for our clients as well. It's how do you position it? How do you frame up the opportunity? And how do you really focus on the challenges that you're helping your client solve?
For a lot of technical consultants, like in marketing operations or marketing technology space, that could be pretty new, because we support marketing, but we don't actually often do marketing of ourselves. I mean, I guess when you're looking for a job, you kind of have to do that to some extent. That's what the resume is.
Right.
But when you started reaching out, I can imagine that being kind of a harrowing, vulnerable space where you're reaching out to people you kind of know, like your professional acquaintances, people you worked with in the past. What do you say to them? How do you ask, do you ask for projects? Do you kind of check in and say like, hey, how's it going? I just happen to be freelance consulting. Like, what is the right, what worked for you?
Yeah, right. It's a bit awkward when you just think about it in that terms, right? Like, hey, give me some work, right? Type of a thing.
Yeah. How do you do that?
I tried to be as human as possible with it, and I think that's with anything. That's what you have to do. But I would reach out to folks and either, depending on who that was, just send them a quick note to give them an update on what I'm doing. And, I would appreciate it if you look out for, if you have any opportunities or anything related that you hear of, keep me in mind. I'd love to be considered type of an approach and a tone of, gratitude and just being there as somebody that could potentially help you. And then there was others where, I would want to invest more time and have a conversation. And so, you'd spend time on the phone just genuinely wanting to hear updates about their career and vice versa, and kind of going down the road of what you do. And again, I think for the, those types of relationships, and even if you don't have a big network, so for example, for those that may be, newer into the space and maybe not as far along in their career, coming even from full-time employment, it's still doable in terms of, reaching out to those that are in your space that, again, either you have a connection with currently or that you don't. And I think there's lots of people out there in today's day and age that are willing to, not necessarily, you could say be a mentor or at least provide some words of wisdom in a way. But, tools like LinkedIn, tools, others that are out there, they provide a great vehicle for having those types of conversations. And again, I think as long as you can be human about it and put your foot forward of, if you just want to make a connection rather than, hey, I'm doing this because, I need the work. That tends to be the ones that are received the best.
Yeah, no, I've seen your advice around being kind of genuine goes a long way. The other one that I think is really helpful is to kind of diffuse the ask by making it more indirect. Because I think a lot of people really do want to be helpful on LinkedIn. Like, that's part of why you joined, is to kind of be helpful to others. And I think when people ask for help, it's also like, I love when people ask for help in a genuine way. And if somebody asked me, do you have work? I think that's really, in a way, like limiting, because you're saying, hey, do the 20 people I know have work? I think a better question is to say, do you know anyone who might have work? Or do you know anyone who might know someone who might have work? Like in that way, like deflecting it from them to someone that they might know, because not only does that expand your reach, because now it's not just the 20 people you know, but it's the 20 times 20 people they know who are potentially now who might have work.
Well, and I agree. And I would add to that, it's an important step for freelancers and consultants that are established as well, right? So when you're finishing up a project, or when, just the circumstances of the work that you have with a client are coming to an end, it's important, a couple things. I take a really diligent approach to ask for a recommendation on every client that I work with. And I use that as kind of a way to kind of accentuate my portfolio, if you will. So if you think about an operations person, right, it's a little bit less tangible than like a writer or a creative marketer that can really have these tangible pieces of work that they can show off.
Like a portfolio or something.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no portfolio at the end of the day for a HubSpot consultant.
Yeah, exactly. Or if there's, you got to be really creative about it, and you got to do certain things. So to the point of asking people for something, I always make it a point to get a testimonial or recommendation. And I find in my experience, the overwhelming majority of clients that you work with, provided that the work goes well and the relationship goes well, they're so more than happy to help out. It's just that I don't think people think to take that step unless they're asked, right? And framing it in a way of, hey, I really appreciate the work that we were able to do together. As you know, things like recommendations and testimonials really go a long way in helping me get new work and, have those conversations with potential new business. I would really appreciate it if you could do that for me. And people, people get surprised. They're so happy to jump in and do those things. And then to your point too, Grant, and by the way, I know this project has ended and we've had a great, we've achieved some great things together. Do you know of anybody else that in your space, your peers, your colleagues, that may be in the need for something similar? But if you don't take the approach of asking, and if you, again, don't frame it up the right way, it can either come off wrong, or again, if you're not even posing the question, you're selling yourself short. And you have to really make sure you're focused on those things, because it's always about the next step, and whether that be the next step with building and expanding on an existing client, or the next step in how you're going to replace a project that's ended and be able to find that next new business.
Hey everyone, Mike Rizzo here, CEO of MarketingOps.com and co-host of OpsCast. I've got a little secret to share with you, something that's been one of the best kept perks of our community until now. At MarketingOps.com, we've built a hiring program that's changing the game for marketing operations recruitment, and we're finally sharing it with the world. Our community is over 22,000 strong, and within that, we have over 4,400 members who are actively and passively seeking new opportunities. These are seasoned professionals with skills and experience spanning platforms like HubSpot, Pardot, Marketo, and so much more. Plus, we can help you fine-tune your outreach, targeting exactly the right candidates by region, years of experience, seniority level, or even agency experience. But here's the real cherry on top. When you hire through our program, your new team member gets a free membership or a virtual ticket to our annual conference. From day one, they're not just stepping into a new role, they're getting access to the training, networking, and support they need to hit the ground running. So if you're ready to unlock this incredible opportunity, it's time to let this secret out. Visit marketingops.com and find your next star teammate today. Thanks for listening, and as always, keep optimizing.
I love that. That's great advice. I've been asking definitely for the quote, like for the recommendation, but I need to learn or, even practice the asking for the referral or, mention my name. That's one of those role playing things that I need to make myself go through.
Yeah. And I think with all this stuff that we're talking about, whether you're just starting your consulting career, or, to your point, Courtney, of asking existing clients and who they might know and things like that. One of the things that I found really interesting about this space is sort of the psychology of it all, right? And it's very different, obviously, than a traditional full-time employment role. You're the CEO, you're the salesperson, you're the marketer, you're everything for yourself, and psychologically you have to prepare that way of, if there's setbacks, if somebody says no, if you put out a LinkedIn post and it doesn't get any engagement, if you spend a lot of time on a proposal and you don't win the work, right? It's kind of like that imposter syndrome of, you start talking down to yourself and you say, well, maybe this isn't the right space for me, or, maybe I'm just not smart enough and that's why I didn't win this work, or this client, didn't see the value or whatnot. And it's really easy to go down those roads. And it stops you. And what it does is long-term, it stops you from taking those steps that we're talking about in terms of continuously connecting with your network and, talking to your peers and looking for new work and asking people for things in a way that, they are more than happy to do. But it takes the right sort of mindset to look at it, in a way that is very different from a traditional full-time role.
Definitely. And I think that's why a lot of people are afraid to take really the leap. Like, you and I are doing it full time. People like to do the nights and weekends and kind of the side hustle. I really wanted to take the leap and dedicate my career to it. I'm curious then, what about the silver lining? Some things that you enjoy? I mean, there's the fear of, keeping the lights on and making money, but what do you find are the benefits and the perks that have kept you independent for so long, for 5 years?
Sure. It's so funny because, when I tell friends or family or things like that, and especially when I first started doing this, the obvious one is the freedom, right? The flexibility of schedule. Right. And if I want to sleep in this day and work till 2 a.m. that night, or,
right.
If I want to, work on the weekends and not work on, certain days during the week, I can do that. And don't get me wrong, those things are all great. But for me, even more than that, I really love the variety of work that I get. I love working with a variety of different companies that can be either, in different industries or different sizes, or have different types of target customers within their space, and as well as the projects I get involved in with them and the platforms I get involved in with them. So for some organizations, it might be, we have a really great vision for our marketing and we have some great campaigns laid out, but we're just really time strapped and we need somebody to kind of own that piece of it, the execution of it, and make sure everything is running properly. And then for other organizations, it might be, we've got some type of vision and we've got some of these pieces and assets in place, but we really need to talk through some of this. And it's kind of a combination of strategy and execution, right? And so the variety in those projects, the variety in the type of people I like to work with, is what really appeals to me most. Even, and again, I don't want to downplay the flexibility of schedule and everything like that, because it definitely is a good perk. But that's what I think partly initially drew me to the space, and it's definitely what's kept me here too.
When you get to be both tactical and strategic, and I feel like sometimes in those full-time roles, as you grow in your career and you get promoted, it's kind of more and more strategy and herding cats, and it's people management, and you don't get to be as tactical. And I've really enjoyed, I like being in the tools and in the platforms and paying attention to new releases and what comes out and keeping those skills fresh. But then also, I love it when a client wants me to come to a strategy session, as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I would imagine, there's a certain level of energy that it provides, right? Where you're kind of switching between this and that. And, it's not for everybody, certainly. I mean, there's certain people that are much more productive and at ease when it comes to, more of a a tactical routine or a similar expectation in terms of what they're going to face that day within the office. And I think, the key to part of this and being successful as a consultant is, having that kind of even keeled approach of not only, the type of work you're going to get and the variety that comes with it, but certainly the ebbs and flows of business that, may come and go and how you kind of adapt along the way.
Hey, Bryan, were you ever tempted to be like, hey, this is not just me. This is like a beginning of an agency. How do you feel about that kind of
That's a great question. It's a great question. I've wrestled with that in my mind for, a lot of times. Even to this day, I don't know necessarily what the future holds in regards to that, but I do think it's important as you begin to get a foothold within the service that you offer, regardless if you have aspirations or not of starting an agency or managing people or anything along those lines. Once you're able to kind of have a proof of concept, if you will, and you've established a sort of a client roster and you can do this as a career. I do think it's important to make connections with, other consultants or freelancers that offer services that are tangent to yours. Right. So I have taken that approach as a start. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, in the marketing ops space, I have a couple of connections with fellow freelancers that might be content writers, others that are designers or developers, right? So this way you can look at it in terms of another avenue to scale. If you are working with a client and they may be in need of those services as well, and vice versa, you have other freelancers and consultants that could pull you into projects. So I have wrestled with that. I still continue to, Grant. It may be something that I go down the road of one day. I haven't taken that step yet. But regardless, I think it's important that any consultant in the space, thinks about how they can continue to build upon, their book of business. And it's more than just raising your rates, right? It's how can you scale projects? How can you get involved in different projects with clients where, you can add more value, you can partner with other resources and really look at a path to scale. Yeah.
No, this is, you've given so many great tips for anybody who's starting out. And what's funny is sometimes I see people become freelance on LinkedIn or something, like as soon as they either leave a job or lost a job or what have you. And I think that there's almost like a grace period, like where people are not sure whether you're really a freelance person or are you just doing this until you get a new job, Sure, I would say at 5 years, you've definitely passed that mark.
Oh yeah.
You're not going anywhere. And so I commend you on that. And it sounds like you're doing what you love. It really comes across. And I wanted to thank you for taking the time to tell us all about your experience.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's fun to reflect back on. And again, I would encourage anyone that's out there that's either in this space or thinking about going down this road to really consider it. Obviously, one of the things that a quote that usually sticks with me that I think I heard from an Oprah talk a while back was, everyone says follow your passion, right? And well, what if you don't know what that is? And in that case, follow your curiosity. And that's kind of what led me to part of this is, again, going back to my full-time employment days, it was, these freelancers, these consultants that we work with, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of curious, right? Like, how do they go about, doing this? And so I'm thankful that it kind of led me to that point, and really grateful that I've been able to make a living out of it, and it's been fun. So I appreciate you guys having me on today. It's been a lot of fun to share, and I look forward to hearing more stories like this.
Excellent. Thanks, Bryan.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
All right. Take care. Thanks.
Bye. And thank you for listening to this episode of SMTC Podcast. If you like this episode, please rate us on the platform you're listening to this on. The ratings help make the podcast better, make it easier for other people to discover it. And also be sure to subscribe. And if you haven't already, join the SMTC by going to joinsmtc.com and join as a member. It's free. We'll look forward to hearing from you. Bye.